Hi, so I want to try this. This is just some really basic stuff. So obviously this isn't what we spend a lot of time on, but I figured it was a good practice to just kind of get used to doing these sort of things. So we're going to be talking about the different kinds of notes and their values. First we're going to start with the whole note, and it looks like a little circle. The way you can tell it apart from a half note is there's no stem. It's just a circle with a space inside. Um, it's always going to look like this, and it's even if it's attached to something, it's still not going to have a stem. So, and then for the whole rest, it's going to look like a little upside down hat, or kind of like a little box floated to the top. It sometimes can be a little bit confusing when you just see it written like this. You'll just see a line with a little box underneath in it, and if it's beneath, it's a whole note, or it's a whole rest. My bad. Um, And again, just you see these two whole notes, they're written, there's no stem, they're just separate. So the next division of notes, and I'll have a little chart below it that I think is pretty cool in terms of explaining how it's all split up. But this one's a half note. The half note looks like the whole note, like I said, but it has a stem that goes up or down depending on where the note is positioned in the staff. This is the half rest, and it looks a lot like a whole rest, so it's gonna have something that you pay attention to. But this one looks like a hat, or like a little top hat for a snowman. It's going to look like that on its own, and then it's going to be floated, drop to the bottom when it's in a staff. Half notes can't be tied together, and so they're just separate by themselves. The next division of a note, we have a quarter note. This is probably the most common one that you'll see, especially in marching music, just because it keeps the steady 4/4 tempo that you mostly use for marching. And it's for common time, which, as you know, the common time or 4/4. This is how it's subdivided with these quarter notes right there. Which obviously you probably know how to count. We're going over it regardless. This is the quarter rest. It's held for one beat, and obviously, like I didn't really clarify, but all these rests are held for the same amount of time as their note equivalent would be. Quarter notes cannot be tied together. They are simply separate. They can be tied, but their stems are never going to be connecting. I don't really know what this is. Oh my gosh, it's a little pointer. That's really cool. Okay, so I like this little pointer thing. This next one, the eighth note. Highlighter here. Okay, so the eighth note is going to, on its own, it's going to look like this. So this is the next subdivision. It's got the little flag on it. And just for a quick review, this part of the note is called the head, the stem, and when you have this, it's called a flag. Kind of irrelevant, but just something kind of cool to know. So the eighth note on its own looks like this. When you have an eighth of a rest, so obviously since it's an eighth note, there has to be 8 of these to make up one beat, which will kind of be explained in this chart down here, but I'll get that in a second. This is going to be an eighth rest. It kind of looks like a 7, and notice how it only, I'm not really sure what they're called, but I'll just call them heads for right now. There's only one little note or one little head right there. Same thing, there's one stem or one flag, there's one head. They kind of match up like that. Now, as with these three, the notes couldn't be connected when there was 2 of them, but with eighth notes and smaller, they can be, and this is simply for ease of reading. As you see, they're kind of connected in a little place like that. Eighth notes have one bar on top because let's, for example, if you have, marching music, you have your bar, your 4/4, and if it looks like this the whole way, it's a lot more complicated to read than if you just had, you know, this. It's just simply for ease of writing. Once they get split into the eighth and further down, they're going to be barred together. And that's, like I said, together they don't have a flag. This is called a bar. Again, not really that technically important, but it's still something just kind of a little trivial to know. Okay, so the next division that this is where probably the last division will go because you can figure it out by here. But if you've noticed, we've done dividing by 2, I guess. So you split that in half, split quarter in half, you get an eighth. You split an eighth in half, you get a 16th, so on and so forth. To you can get 128th notes, which are kind of, no one really ever uses those, so we're not going to go into those. But 16th notes, we can tell them apart from eighth notes. They're going to have 2 flags right there. And then the 16th rest is going to look like this. And like I said, there's 2 little heads because there's 2 little stems. You know, same thing with 16th. The way you can tell that apart from an eighth note when they're barred together is that you're going to have the 2 stems connecting along top instead of just the one as you would have for the eighth note. And this is a really cool chart that I like. I've used it kind of frequently to explain notes to people because I think it does a really good job of splitting up how, let me use a highlighter here, how you get from one to the next. It's like a little flow chart, I guess, and then it just kind of shows how they each split. So you have the whole goes into the half, splits into the quarter notes, and then each quarter note is going to split into an eighth, which then split again is a 16th. With that. And so that's kind of covering the basics for notes. The last thing I want to talk about, you can save this or screenshot it for the reference, and I'm sure you probably have a billion of these because I know Marcy has a ton. But this is going to be your baritone BC, your fingering chart. And I'm not sure if you know, I mean, I think you know how to read the notes on the clef, like you said you did, so we don't need to go over that really. But this is going to be a really helpful visual in terms of, you said you needed help connecting the fingerings to the actual note names because you couldn't play an E, but you can play, all 3 fingers. So I'm not going to go over this much because I don't quite frankly know a lot about it, but here it is if you want to screenshot it, or if you want me just to send you the thing. Honestly, I just Googled it and this was one of the first couple images that came up, so you can probably find it pretty easily on your own. One quick thing, these are the enharmonics, the E and the F flat. We talked about this in band class a little bit. I'll talk about those a little bit later on, so no need to worry about that. Really, if you just look at the first, honestly, if you just look at the first note for now, you'll be fine. The second it gets into the nitty gritties that are really not important right now. So I think this is something that would be really helpful to study. You could do like flashcards, Quizlet, or simply just run them over and over again. Take a look at it whenever you're free minute. I don't know, whatever you do to help get this information into your head. Okay, so I think that's all I have for now. Let me know if you like this and if this works for you. Just have something to go back and look at in between when we're working together. Let me know, and I will keep making these. These are kind of fun. I like them.